Hello and welcome to the Pilgrims Gallery at Bassetlaw Museum for our half-term story time. Today we will be reading If You Sailed on the Mayflower in 1620 by Ann Mcgovern, illustrated by Anna DeVito. Let's begin at the beginning, the most important question for our region. The Pilgrims. Who were the Pilgrims? A pilgrim is someone who goes on a long journey. The people on the Mayflower were leaving their homes to sail far away to a new world, a new life. They were going on a long, long journey, and so we call them pilgrims. Where does the pilgrim story begin? In England, many years ago, everyone had to obey the rules of the King's Church. There were some Englishmen who wanted to have their own separate church. They were called separatists. They had secret church meetings. The king found out about the secret meetings and he put some of the men in prison. Now the separatists were afraid to stay in England. They went to Holland in 1608, where they could worship God as they pleased. They lived in Holland for 12 years. Life in Holland was not easy. The men had to work very hard. They made very little money. And they were worried. They did not want their children to forget how to speak English. They did not want their children to become soldiers and sailors for Holland. What could they do? Perhaps they could go to the New World, some of them thought. These are the people we call pilgrims today. The pilgrims needed a ship to take them to the New World. They bought a ship, the Speedwell, in Holland. But the Speedwell was small and old. They would need a second ship too, a bigger, better ship. But where would they get such a ship? They didn't have any more money. At last they made an agreement with some businessmen in England. The businessmen got them a ship, the Mayflower, and brought some food and supplies. In return, the pilgrims had to agree to work for the businessmen for 7 years. The pilgrims promised to send furs and lumber from the New World. Then, after 7 years, they could begin to work for themselves. The pilgrims thought the agreement was not fair, but that was the only way they could get to the New World. They sailed the Speedwell from Holland to England, where the Mayflower was waiting for them. On the Mayflower. What kind of ship was the Mayflower? The Mayflower was a sailing ship. The ship moved when the wind filled the sails, and the Mayflower was a cargo ship. She was made to carry cargo, things like cloth and hats and barrels of wine. She was not made to carry people. But the Mayflower did bring 102 people from England to make their home in the New World in the year 1620, 400 years ago. The Mayflower was a good, strong sailing ship. She was about 90 feet long, about as long as 2 big trailer trucks, and she was a clean-smelling ship, not like most ships of that time. For 12 years, the Mayflower had carried a cargo of wine on her voyages. Little by little, some wine slowly leaked out of the wine barrels. The wine took away the bad smell of garbage. How many people sailed on the Mayflower? Too many people. The Mayflower carried about 30 sailors and 102 passengers. 34 of them were children. There were not supposed to be that many people on the Mayflower. Some passengers were supposed to sail to the New World on the smaller ship, the Speedwell, which we heard about. But something went wrong. The 2 ships had begun their voyage from England together on August the 5th in 1620, but the speedwell was leaky and had to go back to shore. Some of the passengers from the speedwell stayed behind in England. Others crowded onto the Mayflower. Before the ship reached the New World, there was a new passenger on board. A baby boy was born as the Mayflower sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. Guess what his parents named him? Oceanus. Who sailed on the Mayflower? A doctor, a soldier, a shoemaker and a blacksmith were on board. There was a cooper too. His job was to look after the barrels of beer and water and to make sure they did not leak. Most of the passengers were farmers or weavers or shopkeepers, and there were some servants on board the Mayflower. They were hired to do the hardest work in the New World. Some men brought their wives and children along. Some men sailed without their families. About 35 of the passengers were going to the New World because they could not worship God in their own way in England. They were the Pilgrims, and a lot of them came from our area of Retford, Babworth, Scrooby, Gainsborough, all around this part of England. Other passengers were going because they could not find work in England. Others were going to the New World for adventure.